Amigos y amigas de Breaking News, miran, acá estamos un episodio más, un capítulo más. Y estamos en vivo. Esto que te habla, Jorge Carramos Lugo, que estoy con Enrique Fernández y Arturo Ferrer. Hoy
Buenas
tenemos
noches.
Dos invitados especiales. No uno, dos. Tenemos el padrino del homebrewing en Puerto Rico, el gran Billy Norris. Bienvenido, Billy, ¿cómo estás?
Muy bien, muy bien. Qué bueno
Buenas
estar aquí
noches,
con ustedes. Y qué bueno estar con el otro invitado que ya vas a anunciar ya mismo.
Y ahora vamos a anunciar ahora a nuestro próximo invitado. Es una leyenda. Es un ícono. Él empezó como ingeniero, maestro de escuela. Después de eso se dedicó a hacer a enseñar homebrewing. Y en el año 1978 formó la organización de Homebrewers de Estados Unidos. Y un año después formó el Homebrewers Association. ¿Qué más formó? JBF, World Beer Cup. Y además el día de su cumpleaños dijo, si quiero hacer algo más, me encanta el pie, vamos a hacer el Pie Day, el día de su cumpleaños. ¿Qué más podemos decir de él?
El libro.
Es una leyenda. Además de eso, escritor. Escribió este libro, The Joy
La
of Homebrewing.
La Biblia del Homebrewing.
La Biblia del Homebrewing.
The Homebrewing Bible.
El Homebrewing Bible, aquí está. ¿Qué más podemos decir de él? Las palabras se quedan cortas para el impacto que ha tenido este caballero en el mundo de la devoción. En el mundo.
No llore.
En el mundo de cervezas. Con ustedes les presento el padre del homebrewing, el señor Charlie Papazian. Bienvenido. Welcome, Charlie. How you doing?
I'm doing really well. I'm the only one with beer.
I got some.
Okay, I got one too. So
let's get some beers.
I'm going to open it right
in
there.
the Pilsner glass that you have, Charlie. Very nice glass.
Charlie, first of all,
That's a glass.
good night, and thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us. Really means a lot. I think we speak for every single homebrewer in Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
Thank you for everything you've done. It's amazing. So, good, awesome to have you here tonight.
Thank you.
Great to be here.
Thank you for your time.
What are you drinking actually?
Oh, I'm almost finished with this beer that it's a locally made German-style Pilsner from Upslope Brewery here in Boulder, Colorado, which is where I'm from. And right after I finish this, I'm going to have one of my home brews,
Nice.
an Irish-style stout.
Nice. I love that stuff.
That's great.
It's one of my favorites. Yeah. So, Jorge, what are you
Antes de
drinking?
seguir con la entrevista, rapidito, algo en español, voy a decir algo rapidito. Se escogió la fecha de hoy porque un día como hoy, 14 de octubre, en el año 78, se firmó la ley del homebrewing por Jimmy Carter, que por eso, como quien dice, hoy se conmemora la legalización del homebrewing en los Estados Unidos, y a consecuencia de eso, el impacto que tuvo Charlie en esto.
So the homebrew was legal in the 78.
Yep.
That's something that I knew happened, but I didn't know the exact date until today. And looking back in 1978, I was doing what I was doing, and I didn't even know that was happening. I was making homebrew and trying to teach everybody to make it, whether it was legal or not.
Okay.
The same.
So back then it was illegal.
Yeah. Same thing happened here. It's like maybe 2 years ago.
November 25th, 2015.
Oh, yeah?
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, here in Puerto Rico. So
It was
we
sort of,
were in the gray area. Were in the gray area. It's like we are legal. We are not legal. We are making beer. So
We did
It
the
doesn't
same
bother
as
us.
we did the same as Mississippi and Alabama. Yeah. But we were the last territory to legalize home brewing. So I think one of the last one was Mississippi, and then Alabama. I don't know which one was first, but we were the last one.
Yeah,
Better late than never.
Yeah.
better late than never.
Yeah.
Charlie, going back to to the beginning, because I mean we could sit here for 10 hours talking about stories about your life, but how did you even become interested in sort of not just beer but in good beer? Because when you started, I'm guessing there were basically like 2 or 3 options of what you could drink besides like the really humongous breweries, or how did that happen?
Yeah, well, when I was a college student, there was no such terminology that was expressed by saying good beer. It was just beer.
Beer.
And you got whatever they had, and you didn't complain. And if you didn't enjoy it, well, that was just tough luck. It was just too bad. And I found myself as a college student drinking beer, cheap beer. Everything was cheap. It all tasted the same, whether you wanted to pay triple the price or double the price. It was all tasted the same. And I realized that even then that I didn't like the taste of beer. I was just being a college student. And then one day, a neighbor of ours, I was roommates with 2 other engineering students, and our neighbor said, "Hey, my neighbor makes homebrew. You want to taste some?" I said, "Yeah, let's go try it." And so we tried his homebrew, and it was pretty good. It was better than and more interesting and had more flavor than anything you could buy. And that's what started me thinking about beer that could possibly be labeled as good. Because before that, there was no such thing as good beer or bad beer. It was just beer.
What year was this?
That was about 1970.
1970.
Yeah,
In that time was only the lager style, right?
Well, no, in those days, I guess you could call it prohibition style.
Oh, prohibition style.
It was the ingredients and the recipe and the techniques were all reminiscent and remembering the way it was made during Prohibition. It was basically a can of hop flavored malt extract you could buy in the supermarket, and one can was about 3 pounds, and then you dump 8 pounds of sugar in and added a lot of water, and you stirred it up and added yeast. And that was the instructions that I had. There was nothing said about beer yeast or hops. The hop flavor was already in the extract. I didn't even know what hops looked like for 3 or 4 years until 3 years later. But the beer was good. The first 2 batches weren't too good. We threw it out. But, as we all know, home brewers and craft brewers are very persistent. And we want to succeed because we know it's possible to make better beer, and we just figured it out.
Okay.
How long did it take, like when you first met this neighbor who basically introduced you into homebrewing? Like, how long from then did you start actually seeing amongst your friends or yourself? Like, when did you actually start making beer? Was it quick or?
He wrote a recipe on a piece of paper about this size, and it's like 4 lines, and it was pretty basic. And we went to the supermarket, bought the malt extract, we bought bread yeast, we bought cane sugar, and we figured we had it all. We got a clean pail, trash bin, and we made our first couple of batches, and it was within a month. We were very, very excited about the whole idea. We went out and got bottles from the grocery store, and we brewed it, and it tasted horrible. Even as college students, we wouldn't even drink it. Well, we dumped it. But one of the things we soon thereafter we found out there was a wine making supply store, and they carried some home brewing supplies. They had some malt extract, but we didn't need that because we could get it from the supermarket. But they had something called dextrose or corn sugar, and they had something in little packages called beer yeast or ale yeast. And that's all that those two things made a difference, being able to get corn sugar, dextrose sugar, and some yeast that was better than just baking yeast from the bread yeast from the supermarket. That made the beer good enough to drink and have a great time and make a lot of friends. And as soon as people taste, as you know, when people taste good homebrew, they ask all kinds of questions. And there are a lot of people that started making beer in Charlottesville, Virginia, which is where I went to school back then. And there were little groups of people making homebrew, and we shared it, and we said, this is pretty cool.
Okay, that's nice. Winemaking was legal at that time, right? The only thing illegal was making beer.
Yes, after Prohibition, they legalized winemaking, but the word beer got left out of the new laws. It should have been wine and beer, but just wine was in there. So winemaking was legal.
Okay.
And it wasn't until, as you said, 1978, the law was passed, and it was put into effect in February
79. Yeah.
1979. And the big difference that made in the United States was that the home winemaking shops could now, even though they were carrying home brewing supplies before, they could actually advertise it without being afraid that they would get busted or arrested for selling ingredients that were making beer. No one ever did get arrested. But they would just be cautious because it's a business. And when you're in business, you don't want to lose your business. You don't want to take those kinds of risks. As home brewers, we said, yeah, put me in jail. We'll be homebrew martyrs.
You have good beer.
The beer hobby will get more popular.
When do you decide to found the American Homebrewers Association, and why?
Well, let me just go back. I graduated from the University of Virginia in 1972, and it was that October 6th, I land myself in Boulder, Colorado. And about less than a year later, through various conversations, people found out that I knew how to make beer. And they invited me to teach a class that was called the Community Free School. It was an alternative institution where people who had skills could teach what they knew. And I knew I knew how to make beer. I wasn't very good at it, but I knew how to make beer. And I started teaching beer making. So I did that from 1973 to 1981 for, I taught about 1,000 people in the Boulder, Denver, Colorado area how to make beer. And through that community, there was so much enthusiasm and interest for good beer and sharing it and celebrating it that my friend and one of my students, Charlie Papazian, he and I decided to start the American Homebrewers Association. And we came out with the very first issue of Zymurgy magazine, which was our birth date for the American Homebrewers Association, was December 7th, 1978.
Wow.
Wow. Charlie.
Wow.
Charlie, did you have any backlash from the big guys, the breweries?
No. They laughed at us. I mean, the executives laughed at us. But I found, it didn't take long, but the brewmasters, brewers, whether you're a home brewer or a craft brewer or a professional brewmaster in a large brewery, you love beer. And for most of those people, they appreciated that there were people out there starting to talk about beer and beer making and how it was made in hops and malt and yeast and grain. And they kind of appreciated that that there were beer enthusiasts that really knew something a little bit about beer, and they, that whenever we would visit Coors or Anheuser-Busch or Miller, I mean, I think we got very well received as home brewers in those early days. The marketing people kind of laughed at us, but they're not brewers.
The brewers
that's right.
Yeah.
started to get recognized a little more.
Yeah, we got the last laugh right now.
Well, it's not the last one. It's an ongoing laugh.
Ongoing laugh.
Thanks to homebrewing, the craft beer scene, big, very, very big to this day, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Thanks to homebrewing. So
yeah, the homebrewers are the foundation of what we call the professional craft brewing scene.
Yeah.
People always ask me, well, how many people who are brewmasters or start breweries get their start in home brewing?
Mm-hmm.
And I've visited thousands of breweries all over the world and small breweries all over the United States. And I always ask the question, how'd you get started? And I'd say 95% of people that I ask, they say, well, I started with your book, or I started brewing somebody else. Yeah, now that's great. That's the third edition.
Yeah, you have the fourth, right?
Fourth one is right here. That's the fourth edition.
I need the fourth, right?
I bought the fourth edition via Kindle.
Yeah, there's a lot of good stuff in there. And if you ever, I've always thought that this is just called the Homebrewer's Companion. And if there was ever a volume 2 of Complete Joy of Homebrewing, that's what this is. So there's no duplication in the books. It's just more information about all grain brewing and hops and grain. Then, if you're a real beer enthusiast and love making beer, it's a fun introduction to even more good stuff about beer.
So it complements the first book, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I remember starting brewing with one of your books, and also with Dave Miller, a guy named Dave Miller.
I know David.
Yeah, and also Ray Daniels too. I remember having a book from Ray Daniels.
David Miller, David Miller back in the early 80s, he entered the American Homebrewers National Competition, and he won Best of Show Home Brewer of the Year with an all-grain beer. And he was the very first homebrewer to win the Home Brewer of the Year award, making all grain. And he was like our god. He was like, everybody wanted to know how he did that, because all grain brewing was still mostly a mystery to all of us. I mean, you could read the books and the information that we had, but to make it as good enough, to make it good and the best, to be best to show, that was quite an achievement in those days. And David, after that, he developed a real love for beer and became a professional brewer in Missouri and Kansas and where he lived.
Yeah.
What did you guys do to get your hands on ingredients during those days? Was it fairly easy? Was it still like completely the ingredients you were getting were bad, or like not? How
second-hand hops.
Was it like you were brewing with completely like leftovers, or was it pretty accessible?
I would say through the 1970s, we were mostly making malt extract beer, and a lot of it was hop flavored malt extract. If you went into a homebrew shop in the early days and you asked for hops, the hops would be wrapped in pink paper, and it would be on the shelf. And when you open up this, it was like opening up newspaper and opening up this hop. It would be brown and crumble. It would crumble in your hands. That's what that was our first introduction to what hops looked like. It was awful.
Like old and cheesy.
You were so much better off getting hop flavored malt extract and brewing. But later on, as home brewing became popular, they began supplying us with good hops, because the hop suppliers were used to supplying hops in train car loads to whoever was going to buy them. There weren't a lot of homebrew supply shops. There were no microbreweries, and so home brewers put their minds together, and they bought a lot of hops, and then they split them up. And back in, I'd say, the mid '80s, it were homebrew shops that came up with the idea of vacuum packing hops so that they stayed fresh.
Nice.
And the hop companies weren't doing that. Even the delivery to the breweries, they would just send bales, and they'd be put in a big refrigerator, big warehouse refrigerator, but it wouldn't be vacuum sealed, or even the pellets, the nitrogen, the way they preserve hops now. Because it was home brewers that really appreciated the hop flavor and the hop aroma. The big brewers they weren't interested in that at all. So, it was the home brewers that came, they put that together. And then there were home brewers that really liked to research yeast and try different yeast. And then there was Y Yeast and White Labs that emerged. Those companies were home brewers that said, we can put a company together and supply really good yeast to home brewers, because as a home brewer back in 1970s, if you wanted yeast, you had to know somebody at a big brewery, or you would pay $100 or $200 to get a yeast plant, literally. And $100 in those days is like $400 or $500 now. It was really
that was to get it shipped from Europe.
Yeah, it would be shipped from Europe, or there was a yeast or sequel to Chicago, or there was a Maryland yeast bank too. I'm gonna start drinking my Dusty Mud Stout.
Nice.
Okay, by the way, what's your favorite style of beer?
The one I'm drinking right now.
Okay.
Whatever I'm drinking.
Okay.
Charlie, talking about the yeast. Do you still have the legendary yeast from the 82 from Coors?
Oh, the fist bump hop? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, the yeast from Coors.
There was like a classic strain of yeast I believe you received in, was it from Coors?
Yeah, 1983. I was invited to make beer for the Master Brewers Association of America District St. Louis meeting. And that was a meeting with about 100 master brewers in the area of St. Louis. And they wanted me to talk about my homebrew adventures back in 1983. And I said, yeah, I'll come and talk. And then they got an idea that maybe I could make some homebrew to share with them. And I said, well, okay. And then they came up with a better idea 2 weeks later. They said, we're going to take your beer and put it in cans. And I said, really? How are you going to do that? Well, we'll figure it out. We'll work with Ball Corporation. We'll make some beer. And we have a little packaging line in the basement of Anheuser-Busch, and we can figure it out how to do that. I said, well, I'm a home brewer. How much beer do you want? He gave me some number. I said, nah, that's not going to work. And so I made about 50 gallons of beer.
Oh.
Nice.
No, let's see. It was about 6 or 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 quarter barrels. So that's a barrel and a half of beer. That's about 50 gallons. And
in 5 gallon batches.
5 gallon batches. That's all. That's what I made. And I made it from malt. I made it from malt extract because that's what I was best at in those days. But I added specialty grains. But the key that I knew then was I really needed to get good yeast. And I had some friends at Coors Brewing Company that gave me some yeast, and they didn't tell me where it came from, but they said it's good yeast. They gave me an ale yeast, which I never found out what that was, and then they gave me a lager yeast, which I found out about later where it came from. But the lager yeast was good, and I still brew with that yeast now.
Nice. Nice.
That's crazy. So
That's crazy. Like at 30 something years
So
trying
you
the
kept
same yeast.
propagating that thing.
I kept it alive all these years.
We have a special guest with us that will be on video that have a question for you, Charlie. Señor director, tira la primera pregunta.
Roll that clip now.
Hi everybody, my name is Jorge Castro. I'm from Buck's Lab Brewing Company up in Aguadilla, Puerto Rico, West Coast. Thanks for having me on the show, and thanks for giving me the opportunity to ask Charlie Papazian a question. This is a great honor for me. Charlie, we love you. Thank you for all your work. My question is, did you ever actually consider opening a commercial brewery at all? We know you're a champion of home brewing, and I would like to know what particular reasons made you not do it if you actually considered it. So again, thanks for the opportunity. Big ups to you, sir. Much respect. Stay safe, and thanks for the opportunity, guys. Bye bye.
Gracias, Jorge Castro, por la pregunta.
Yeah, yes, I have thought about opening up my brewery quite a bit. And as you know, I have visited many, maybe thousands of breweries all over the world and talked to brewers, and I've seen people succeed. I've seen people fail. I've seen people struggle, and most people have been successful that I meet. But I've considered it a lot. Beer is my business, and I work late, and I've experienced a lot in the beer world, and yes, I've considered it, and a lot, and I decided, because I considered it so much, I really decided not to do it because I recognize that it's a business. It's not home brewing. It's a lot of work. You're dealing with not only beer, but you're dealing with more people and managing and ingredient supplies and marketing people and regulations and governments. And there's a lot to craft brewing. And I really enjoy what I do with beer, which is making it as a hobby and sharing it with my friends, just like most of you as home brewers, if you're a home brewer. And I also enjoyed with the Homebrewers Association and Brewers Association for 40 years. I really enjoyed, I guess, what you could call teaching and
An advocate. You're an advocate of the industry.
Yeah.
You're the mentor for so many people.
Yeah,
Like teaching. Yeah.
I'm sure if I brewed a beer, if I started a brewery, if there was no stress involved in having to sell it or dealing with all the things that craft brewers have to deal with, and I could relax and not worry and have beer.
I read something.
That's very, very rare.
Yeah, I read something. I think it was on Zymurgy a few years ago. An article that said that once you start brewing for profit, then the hobby is done. So it's not hobby anymore. It's business. So
no, it's work. It's like everything that you take a hobby and you turn it into a job. Kind of I don't know. If you get lost, it's not that happy anymore.
Yes, there's not. I want to recognize that I've met most of the brewers that I meet are in love with what they do, and they love making beer. And if you're a craft brewer and a brewmaster, and you start small and then you grow and then you become the manager of the brewery and you can't brew as much. I've talked to a lot of those kinds of people, and they miss making beer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's like an evolution. We all go through various phases in life, and some people can really enjoy going from being a beer maker to a manager to an owner to a marketing person, and they love every aspect of it. And I enjoyed what I did. It wasn't all about just home brewing and making beer, but talking to so many different people, and discussing so many ideas and perspectives. And, I had a degree in engineering, so there's some science in me in background, but I also are, kind of artistic in the way I approach things. So I can have a conversation with I can have a conversation with a marketing person or a manager, because I've been a manager, or a brewer, and these are always so enjoyable to do. If I was sitting there in person with you four of you, we'd probably go far into the night, drinking beer and talking about all kinds of things.
I'm personally kind of glad you never opened the brewery, because maybe we wouldn't have gotten all these amazing things that you've done over your career. Because it's time consuming. But stuff like the GABF, it's like basically revolutionized the way everything works in this industry now. So I'm curious, going back to the homebrew part, how does your current homebrew system look like? Are you one of these super high tech homebrewers?
I think most people would be very surprised if they saw my homebrew. They'd probably be disappointed. I still brew in a 10-gallon stainless steel pot, either on a stove in the wintertime when it's cold outside in my brew garage, or outside on a propane burner. But I brew in the pot, I mash in the pot, I scoop and ladle it out into a plastic bucket with a false bottom, and I grind my own grains, and I keep things simple. I've seen many people get very sophisticated. They spend a lot of time getting the latest gadgets and pumps, mash systems and thermometers, and it really, it's so much fun to do. But when I make beer, I usually can do it in 4 to 5 hours from start to cleanup with all grain brewing, and I keep it simple because I find that I brew more often and I enjoy it when I keep it simple and I can clean up very quickly. If you have pumps and gadgets, there's so many things to clean, and it kind of doubles your time and as far as time you spend preparing and also cleaning up afterwards. So
you just start at 8 in the morning and you finish at 6 o'clock. It's like the whole day brewing.
Do you still make brew beer with malt extract?
No, I don't. But if I was in a situation where that's all that was around, I could make beer with malt extract. And if I shared it with the same friends that enjoy my beer now, they wouldn't know the difference. Perfect. I've done that before. When I made the transition, I was making good all grain beer, and every once in a while I would make malt extract beer just to prove that it's not the all grain or the malt extract that makes better beer. It's your skill with ingredients and getting fresh ingredients. The thing with me is all grain. I love making beer. I like the process. I like that 4 or 5 hours it takes to fill the room with the smell of malt and hops, and it's just so enjoyable. That's
how
why
often
I make all grain beer. If I wanted to make it quickly, if that's what I really was into, I make malt extract. But time is not a factor.
How often are you homebrewing these days?
Well, during the pandemic, it seems I'm doing about twice a month. On the average, it's probably more like once a month. But it seems like I'm home.
You're homebrewing.
You just drink, have a beer with dinner every night. My wife loves beer too, and so just got to keep up. And we have some friends over every once in a while and keep our social distance and all that. But the beer goes quickly.
Yeah, I was telling the same thing to my brother, who is the director of the show. I was telling him, I made this IPA, and you miss it because I drink a lot. I was drinking the whole week and the week and the past week, and it's like a shake out the keg, and it's like, oh no, I don't have any from my brother.
It's have a hole in the bottom.
So he missed my IPA. Sorry, Ariel. Mala mía.
There is a question from Arturo Carrion. Kike, if you can.
So I think, Charlie can see this, right? You can see the question on the screen?
Yes.
Yep.
The first Belgian style beer that I ever had was in the mid 1970s, when a guy named Charlie Finkel started importing beers from Europe. And one of the beers he was importing was Lindemann's Creek and Lindemann's Creek.
Nice beers.
Very authentic Creek and goods. And my first impression was, we've been throwing beer out that tasted like this. So if it was fresh, but we did like the Creek. It was really different. It just opened our eyes to, wow, a sour beer, that is drinkable. This is really, really eye-opening. And it had some fruit in it too. And then there was some Belgian ales that began coming into the country that had that banana ester to it, that fruity banana kind of character, which in the 1970s, if you got banana in your beer, you always got banana in your beer. You're trying to get rid of the banana in your, because you're using not too good ale yeast. And all home brewers had a lot of home brewing had a lot of hint of banana. We were trying to get rid of that because, it was nice, but we knew we could do better.
Yeah. We have another question via video of another friend of us. Tírala, señor director.
Hello, Charlie. I am Raymond Perez. I'm a founding member and past president of Homebrewers of Puerto Rico Homebrew Club. We are very honored for you to be on the show, and you are a real inspiration to all of us. So thank you. I have two questions. First, what do you foresee will be the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic on the craft beer industry? And second, what's your take on hazy IPAs? Finally, I would also like to thank you for coining the phrase relax, don't worry, have a homebrew, which is a philosophy of life. So thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome. Well, I will never apologize for saying relax, don't worry, have a homebrew.
Yeah, I have it right here.
Really, we're offended that you need to take beer making too much more seriously. Relax, don't homebrew is giving people the wrong message. I said, well, you go on your way and make beer the way you want to. I'm going to have fun. So, so the question was hazy beer, hazy IPAs, and the other question was
the pandemic.
The pandemic.
The effects of the COVID-19 thing on
COVID-19. I've seen a lot. I've seen many extraordinary challenges that craft brewers have had. I guess it remains to be seen. We have to get through this first and look back at history of this. But there were so many challenges that craft brewers had. Consider if you were an early microbrewer and you're trying to sell your beer, and there was nobody that wanted to sell it. The retail stores would not, the grocery stores wouldn't take it. The wholesalers, distributors didn't want it. It was so difficult. And if you wanted to start a microbrewery, you had the idea, if you could get it going in 2 years, you were lucky, because there was nobody making equipment. There was nobody supplying hops. There was nobody supplying yeast. There was nobody supplying malt other than in train cars. So you had to figure out all those logistics. Those were extraordinary challenges. Now, COVID-19 is another challenge, and it's a known challenge, I think it's not as extraordinary as the challenges that some craft brewers have had in the past. Even the laws. Consider in 1970, late 1970s, homebrewing became legal, and brew pubs were illegal in all 50 states. So you couldn't have a brewery restaurant, and the laws had to be changed one state at a time.
Wow. Yeah.
That was extraordinary. And the only people that were interested in doing that were homebrew enthusiasts in their early days. They just wanted to help out just for the love of beer. David Miller is one great example. He helped pass the law in Missouri. But so COVID-19, no doubt, it's a challenge. And some brewers are fortunate that they can package their beer and get it into distribution and keep afloat. Some brewers have developed a community of people that will come by the brewery and pick up takeaway beer, enough to sustain them and get them through these difficult times. But there are different circumstances to every brewery, and different states have different laws. You can do this, you can't do that. It just depends on where you are. There are some challenges, and you have to be very, very good at making the right business decisions. And even the best, most skilled people will make bad decisions. I've done it myself. So, and this is not a good time to be making the wrong decision. And those will happen, and some people will undoubtedly need to go out of business. But I think it's, there are over 8,000 breweries. There are still breweries opening up now during COVID-19. There are breweries that are closing. There's just too much. They took on too much debt, and their bank won't work with them to get through this. But for the most part, everybody's trying to help each other out. So I think this is going to be a real learning experience. And, let's say 2 years from now, we look back. I think craft brewers will be strong and independent, and the whole phenomena of good beer made by small and independent breweries is not going to go away.
No.
Nice.
There's some pretty good words for encouragement.
Yeah.
It's tough. It's
tough.
not.
It's tough. It's tough.
Not all, the happiness of making beer and serving it to your customers. It's all of a sudden you're presented with a lot more challenges than you've ever dreamed you needed to take. But we got to get through it, all of us, no matter what we're doing.
Definitely. Second part of that question was the hazy IPA thing. What's your take on? What do you think of hazy IPAs? And speaking of hazy IPAs, I'm having a pretty good one right now. That's a really hazy one.
Is that a yellow ceramic mug, or is that actually?
Looks like orange juice.
It looks like pineapple juice.
Yeah.
I like some hazy IPAs. I mean, not all of them. I have my preferences, though I couldn't name any brands because there's so many out there. Two things I want to say is that I do enjoy good hazy IPAs, but enough is enough. You don't have to take off all the other varieties of beer off your taps and put on 15 different hazy IPAs. I mean, there's so much more to beer than just hazy IPAs. I know that they sell like crazy, and that's truly, I think you could classify it as a fad right now. But I think a lot of the traditional beer styles like this, my dusty mud Irish stout, and some of the traditional beers that we, the early microbrewers and early beer enthusiasts grew up with are going to come back again. But back in the 80s and the 90s and the early 2000s, you had a lot of English style ales, a lot of Belgian style ales, a lot of German style ales and lagers, and a lot of experimentation that homebrew or craft brewers and homebrewers were doing, and there was such a variety of flavors: malty, hoppy, bittersweet, fruity, weedy, this and that. And when I go into a pub and there's only 10 taps and 8 of them are hazy IPAs or hazy pale ales, I'm kind of disappointed.
Deal breaker.
Yeah, like you want some of the old flavors, like a porter, like a stout. You want a refreshing Kolsch, a pilsner, some saisons. I love saisons. It's one of my favorite styles.
When you brew yourself, do you change a lot of the styles, or do you have some that you tend to stick to?
I have some regular recipes that I make. All my beers, I would say most all my beers, that's my stout that I'm drinking right now is an exception because it's a traditional style. But I say all my beers there's a process or an ingredient or something that's unique about them that, you could never get the kinds of beers that I make in a brew pub unless they were copying my recipes. Because when I make a lager, for example, I might start out with the idea of a German-style Helles, but then I like Czech-style gold lagers, and it's kind of a hybrid of the two. And then I will late hop and dry hop with lager hops that usually are put into lagers, and I'll dry hop. And there's no traditional Czech brewer or traditional German brewer that will dry hop with their hops, even if it's Hallertauer. I dry hop with Hallertauer and Saaz and things like that. And man, they make some delicious beer. And there's some great American hops too, Mount Hood and Stentium. Those make terrific.
Sterling, I like Sterling.
Flavors in the aroma in lagers that most people are just missing out on.
Charlie, we are home brewers. We are. That's the hobby. That's the thing that you can experiment.
If you can't get it, make it yourself.
We have a question from one.
Alexis,
Alexis is one of the home brewers in Puerto Rico. The question of
weirdest beer you have ever.
The weirdest beer that you have brewed.
Oh, yeah. Weirdest. Well,
a hazy IPA. Depends what you consider weird, I guess.
Back in the early days, in the 1970s, when we made our first honey lager or honey flavored ale, that was at the time the weirdest thing that anybody had ever heard. Professional brewers said, "That's not beer. You can't do that." And, and then when we started putting fruit in our beers, that was crazy. That was just like, who ever heard of putting fruit in your beer? And then when we started discovering the spice cabinet or the herbal teas that were in our houses and putting those ingredients, those were unusual, extreme beers. They weren't extreme alcohol. They weren't extremely, barrel aged or sour. They were just, we were using ingredients that nobody had used for 100 years or 200 years. Of course, all those ingredients were used way back when, before hops were as popular as they are now in beer.
Or maybe was the beer from Belgium or beers? Is it like there's no Belgian beers in the US in that time that they use that kind of flavors too. They have the one that you said, the Creek one. They have cherries. Yeah. It's like a sour with cherries. It's something like even now people doesn't know that's a style that is kind of old. It's very old, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But people is like tasting right now in 2020.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think some of the early beers where we were putting all kinds of spices and chili peppers and chocolate and, honey, those were at the time, those are pretty extreme and different and weird. These days, you'd have to be,
I'm very creative.
I don't know whether I could be as creative now as I was.
Yeah. You have a question from Ramiro Colon.
Do you like the beers brewed with Brettanomyces and sour beers, funky beers, sour beers?
I do. You know, if they're very well made, there's a certain balance. I don't like it just sour beers just because they're sour. Very sour beers are just, they have to be in balance. And I like the Brettanomyces character I really like the character of some of the old classic brands of Gueuze and Lambic that come from Belgium. And those are great. I like that character. It's not just about, I'm going to make a malt and wheat beer and I'm going to put some Brettanomyces and I can make that and taste. It's difficult to do. You have to be a very skilled brewer to do that.
And what is your take on dry yeast versus liquid yeast?
I haven't experimented too much with dry yeast lately, but you know, when they started making quality dried lager yeast, I did try those quite a few times, and I was really, really impressed at how excellent the beer was. So and that was a real challenge to make lager yeast make excellent beer. And so now there's so much variety out there. I think that in the yeast technology of the people who make dried yeast is so excellent that if I was in a situation where I couldn't get good liquid yeast, I think I would be very happy with the varieties of dried yeast that are out there now.
There's Marco saying hello from Argentina. Saludos, Marco.
Saludos de Puerto Rico, Argentina.
Yeah. Well, the other question that was asked about part-time, I don't get a paycheck for doing beer making anymore. I never have. So it's not a part-time job. It's still a hobby for me. Twice a month. I still experiment. I found some hops on an island off the coast of Maine, growing in the wild, and I dug up the roots and I planted them a year ago. And this year I harvested maybe a kilo's worth of dry hops, and right now I have a Helles style of beer that I hopped with, I late hop with. I'm going to dry hop 2 different times. So I'm going to see what these hops do, because they're not like, they don't have citrusy character. They don't have fruity character. They don't have wild hop onion character. So I'm interested in this. This is fermenting right now. So I can't tell you what they're going to be like.
We have another question from Walo Robles. Saludos, Walo.
Yes, I have done collaboration. I'm giving a talk online in a couple of weeks to the Ontario craft brewers who brewed one of my recipes, and distributing the beer to all the people who are attending registered for the virtual conference. And we're going to do an online tasting, and they're going to send me something. So I did that. I've done a collaboration in France where I introduced the idea of putting coriander into a mild ale in France. And that was really, do we really want to do this? I said, no, it'll be pretty good. And so it was a brown mild ale, and it was English style, and we put coriander seed. And a year later, I said, well, how was it? Because I wasn't there to taste it. He said, we made it twice. It was so popular. So, so I made, every once in a while, I'll make collaborate with somebody.
Another question from Paquito. Saludos, Paquito.
Saludos, Paquito. Si tienen más preguntas, nos las escriben en los comentarios. Y
another home brewer from Puerto Rico. I had his Marzen recently. Really good beer. If you had to choose one style of beer to brew for the rest of your life, which would it be? I'm guessing an Irish dry stout.
That might come in second. One style of beer, that's hard. 2 styles, I could give you 2 styles, because then you could blend them. Then you have 3 styles, right? If you had 4 beers, you do the math. You could do a lot of different styles. You could blend them, but 1 style. Oh, well, I say right now, I'm very much, I just got through a very hot summer in Colorado, and I've been drinking a beer. I call it Wild Peacock Lager. It's a golden lager. It's reminiscent of a Czech style lager, but then I dry hop and I use French hops. So it's not just a style, it's a particular recipe. So it's a dry hopped lager that's about 5.5%. Has a lot of hop. It has enough hop bitterness. It's golden, has hop aroma and hop flavor, and it's very refreshing. So that's, if you were on an island, a warm island, like
We are an island.
that would be a beer. If I was in a cold island, then maybe I would have a stout.
Hoppy lager sounds like a good idea. That's a good choice. Another question from Francisco.
Growth of craft beer industry. They in the beginning they behaved like they were resisting because they didn't really realize or didn't understand how they could make money doing that, and why would they spend their time packaging hops and packaging malt in bags. I mean, bag malt. Everybody knows bags of malt, right? In those days, early days, there was no such things as bags of malt. You got a train car load, or you didn't get any malt at all. So the industry has evolved and grown because they learned from homebrewers and homebrew shop owners and very small craft brewers, because they didn't evolve quickly enough. So we just took care of our own needs our own way. We would collaborate and form co-ops and buy ingredients and then share them and repackage them and use the best technology we could figure out to keep things fresh and available. And then they saw that things were happening and people were making better and better beer. People wanted to make better and better beer. And then there were people that, like all of us, had tasted good beer and they really wanted to help us out. And there were people in the hop business and the malt business and the yeast business and the distribution business that became beer enthusiasts themselves. And they were what you call mavericks, or just different kind of people from the traditional business person at the time. And they really went out of their way to help set up systems in which people could get good technology, information, and ingredients and supplies. So, the marketplace resisted. Like I said earlier, retail stores wouldn't carry retail wouldn't carry microbrewery, and distributors didn't want it because they didn't think they could make money. And small brewers were such a pain in the neck when they could sell 100,000 cases of beer to a grocery store. That's where the money was. They didn't want to deal with little businesses. So other businesses formed and they dealt with the distribution, and microbrewery tap houses emerged and started selling, and people like you and I would go to those places and people would make money. And people scratch it, well, they're making money with this. Maybe we ought to figure out how we can participate. So,
still getting a bunch of questions from homebrewers.
Yeah.
The next one, Kvike versus traditional. Have you brewed something with Kvike? Or
I have not brewed anything, but I've tasted some extraordinarily good beers made with Kvike yeast. And at 3 or 4 different times in very warm climates, I've had lager beers that were made in 5 days.
Wow.
Nice.
Yeah. They take the Helles and the Pilsner and the steam beer that I had tasted as good as a traditionally made one. I was really impressed.
Yeah, my brother, I think it was maybe 2 months ago, he brewed a Quebec lager. That he said I will make a Quebec lager. What is a Quebec lager? It's like a ale lager. So why do you call it Quebec lager? Because you have the it's like have the same taste like a lager, and he made it like a 90 something degrees taste
Yeah.
like a lager.
Yeah.
It was like a Helles beer. Tastes really like a lager.
Tropical island yeast.
It's pretty amazing. There's a lot of different varieties, so you have to get the right one to make the right kind of beer.
Yeah.
But it's not like you just take one package and you could do it like magic. You got to be a good brewer and do it the right, and experiment and choose and figure it out. But it's possible, and that's a big game changer, because if you can make a lager in 5 days, you would need 1/4 the building size to make a lager, brewery size to make a lager.
Yeah.
Game changer.
Game changer.
We have another question regarding the water profile in beers here. Do you worry about getting to that perfect water profile from wherever the beer is, or are you?
Well, as you know, I never worry. I might get concerned, but I wouldn't worry. I'm very lucky in Colorado. I have good water, and I just use the water that comes out of my tap. And in the summertime, I can use well water that doesn't have chemicals in it. In the wintertime, there's a low dose of very small amount of chlorine that's in the disinfectant in the water, so you can hardly taste that. So I'm pretty lucky here. But if I was living in a place where there's iron or sulfur or very hard water, I'd have to figure out a way to
get it to that sweet spot. Nice.
It's different for everybody,
Yeah.
I think we have one more video.
Yep.
That we got from our friends at Ocean Lab Brewing.
De nuestro amigo José Carlos González, mi hermano de Ocean Lab.
Hello, Charlie. My name is Jose Gonzalez. I'm the brewmaster here at Ocean Lab Brewing Company in Isla Verde, Puerto Rico. And first and foremost, we wanted to thank you for your passion of teaching the home brewing trade that has been critical in the development of pro brewers around the world right now. And also for being such a critical part in the development of the Brewers Association, that has been the organization that pretty much gave us all the material that we refer to every day as brewers. So we wanted to invite you to come to Ocean Lab in a future trip and share with us all your passion. And we'll make sure that we follow your steps and teach the trade of brewing in Puerto Rico. So, again, thank you.
You're welcome. Well, I'd love to come down and visit someday after the COVID-19 is under control, and you know how to get in touch with me, so that'd be fun. I really enjoy it.
That'd be awesome.
We have a question from William Quintana.
If I can revive an old non-existing beer style, what would that be and why? Well, if it's non-existing, how am I going to revive it? Oh boy, I don't know. I don't know how to answer that.
It's a tricky, right?
Yeah. Going along with what the brewer from Ocean Lab Che just said, it would be awesome if you're ever down in PR.
Yeah, I would be in touch for sure.
Yeah.
So, Billy, la última pregunta.
I was thinking about the home brewing community. Before the pandemic, I know that the home brewing community was, dropping down in numbers. And thanks to the pandemic, the home brewing industry is, picking up again. But do you think it will last? Because I know, I read somewhere that in 2017, there was 1.2 million of home brewers, and the next year was dropped to 1.1 home brewers. But do you think they will, pick up again, like maybe 10 years ago?
I don't know. I don't think homebrewers, the hobby is going to go away, but yes, I have observed that. I've talked to homebrew shops here in Colorado, and they're doing really well. There's people are coming into the homebrew shop that never ever been in a homebrew shop before to get ingredients and try their hand at homebrewing. So as long as there are beer enthusiasts who love good beer, the homebrewing goes in cycles. And it's not as dramatic as it used to be. It's more like a wave right now. I think it's very stable. I know that the American Homebrewers Association, at least a year ago, had 45,000 homebrew members, and they were concerned that they weren't growing. But in my mind, if you have 45,000 homebrewers and consistently year after year, that you don't need to grow. I mean, that's a good, solid base of homebrew enthusiasts, and each one of those beer makers are sharing their beers with 20 or 30 of their friends, and taste good homebrew, and they realize that they can do it, and it's not that intimidating. The whole relax, don't worry, have a homebrew, that came out of the whole thing, the whole idea that we all confront is when we are confronted with something new and challenging that we've never done before, we're nervous. The first, a lot of times we think, oh, I can't do that. I don't know how to do that. And that relax, don't worry, have a homebrew was encouraging words that yes, you can do it. It doesn't have to be. You don't have to worry about it. You're going to make good beer. It might not come out the same way the way you exactly wanted it, but you're going to be happy for what you did, and you're going to learn. And that's what life is all about. And I think home brewing is one of those life experiences. People come and go. People get very enthusiastic. They'll brew for 10 years, and maybe they'll have a life experience where they can't brew for 5 or 10 years, and then they'll come back to the hobby later on. Not that we don't want another pandemic, but there are things that happen that encourage people to look at themselves and discover what they can achieve on their own, and appreciate and enjoy and learn. And home brewing is such a rewarding hobby that I don't think it's going to go away. It might not be the number one hobby in America, but it certainly doesn't need to be.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Charlie, one thing here in Puerto Rico, I think the first home brewers that like a small community here, we brew beer. We make the homebrew experience because here we don't have the chance to get so many styles or so many beers from the US, from the world. We can. It's like I'm gonna make a porter. I'm gonna make a stout, but I don't know how the stout and the porter. It's like I don't know the flavor. It's like I'm making IPA, but I never have an IPA. I think that was the first homebrewers in Puerto Rico. I think that was the challenge from us.
Yeah.
And right now, I think that it's coming more beer from the world, from the US. So many breweries is coming from the US. That people is like. Tasting those beers, they like those beers, and they say, "Oh, I can imitate this beer." So they're coming into the home brewing to imitate the beer. Because we are an island, the beer doesn't come that fresh in here. It's like maybe not that fresh.
Well,
but people want to drink fresh beer.
Yes.
How do you think?
I can relate to what you're saying because back in the 1970s, all of us homebrewers were living on an island. All across America, we were little islands, and we're doing our thing. And this was before internet. So, you know, if you wanted to go visit, if you wanted to communicate, you had to get in a rowboat and row to the next island to find out what they were doing.
Yeah, it's more difficult. Yeah.
And we were making beer that we never tasted before. You know,
Yeah.
we never had. We heard about these real ales in England, and here's the instructions on how to make it. But unless you go to England and taste it in the pub, you don't know how to get it exactly right. Or you go to Germany and taste the lagers at different breweries all across Bavaria, you don't get it right. And so if you want to make beer to style, but home brewing isn't making beer to style. I mean, I've gone full cycle. I mean, I was trying to make beer to style, and now I don't make beer to style at all. I make my own beer, knowing what I do from all the beers that I've had around the world and what I can do and taste it. And I make beers using little pieces of information and little experiences from many different kinds of beer, and create things that are not dramatic or extremely eccentric, but they are different I guess you could say essays. There are different stories about a beer style and made in a different way.
That's the greatness of homebrewing. Yeah.
Yeah, the best thing of homebrewing is you can do
whatever you want.
Yeah, you can do whatever you want.
You have to keep to one style. Yeah, it's good. Yeah.
Charlie, thank you for being here with us tonight. I'm gonna do one more question. If you had any advice for a home brewer who wants to go pro, like what's the one thing you would say do or don't do, or what are your comments on that?
Well, my biggest thing I would suggest is don't let your ego get involved. You're not trying to prove anything. You need to learn as much as you can and continue learning throughout the process of your brewing adventure. And you know, you can never learn enough, and you learn from others, and you know, don't let your ego get in the way.
That's right, your ego. Yeah. Don't forget it. Your ego, no way. No ego.
And also,
you don't need that.
The famous phrase that you coined yourself, relax, don't worry,
relax.
have a homebrew.
Yeah, relax and have a homebrew. I finished mine.
Cheers.
Cheers.
I have to say thank you to Ian Ortiz, que me envió esta gorrita. Gracias, Ian Ortiz. Agradecido.
Thank you, Charlie.
Gracias.
By the way, we love your shirt.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
It's pretty cool. Yeah.
Hop Guayabera. That's.
We're going to go, but Charlie, don't go. Stay on the.
Yeah, we're gonna finish the show now. We'd like to take a picture, a screenshot.
Yep.
So,
gracias a todos.
Cheers to all of you, and wherever you're signing in from. Hope to meet you someday in person and share a beer.
Of course.
Thank you, Charlie. Cheers.
Gracias a todos por sintonizarnos. Será hasta la próxima aquí en Breaking News, Beer and Coffee, Salud y Pesetas. Y gracias, Charlie.
Gracias.
Fue un honor. Salud. Llévatelo, señor director.